You know, I would like to have more than one or two scenes per episode set in the daylight. Because, you know what I noticed in this episode? Nearly every single scene was dark. And half the scenes that weren't dark were inside or in a darkened room. There are barely any scenes set during the daytime. I can think of one, two, two. I can think of two scenes set in the daytime. When actually no, I'm not going to count. I'm not going to count there because I'll probably forget one. But anyway, this was another fairly solid Game of Thrones episode. It actually excised some of the plot lines, or not excised, but kind of pushed to the side some of the plot lines that I didn't particularly care about. Um, like the Prince Oberyn, his entire character and his motivations. At this point, anyway, I don't really care too much about. Um, Unfortunately, no Arya in this episode, but this did provide some very some very good character moments, and it did set up some future storylines that are sure to bring a whole new dynamic to a lot of the characters and their interactions. By far, the best stuff, the best material in the show, and and nearly all of the most interesting scenes were about Jaime Lannister. Because not only do we still get that plot line where he's conflicted between his loyalties to Cersei and his loyalty to Tyrion. He's leaning towards Tyrion at this point because Cersei is being completely unreasonable. Um, but that was interesting, and Nikolai Coster-Waldau plays that pretty well. Um, he's one of those guys that's able to get across a lot with very little. I mean, he barely even has to. A lot of the time, he doesn't even have to say a line, and you know what he's thinking. You know what is troubling him. You know that there is clearly a conflict going on, and that is the mark of a good actor, in my opinion, or one of the marks of a good actor. And also, we got another scene, thankfully, with Bronn and Jaime practicing swordplay. I was hoping we would get another scene somewhere down the line of those two because those two are hysterical, and how their little sparring session eventually ended was gold. So those two have a pretty funny dynamic between the two of them. We also got again a another another big another big standout, or the standout moment of the first part of the episode was Daenerys, the white-haired dragon chick, finally taking over the slave city, the latest conquest in her campaign. Now, that was an interesting bit of psychological warfare that they set up last time around, and I'm glad that they didn't immediately follow up on that by basically saying "Revolution" like immediately afterwards, because obviously the slaves, having plenty of common sense, basically say, we've this has been tried before, and it's failed. I mean, we're not warriors; we have no weapons, so um, naturally the the solution is actually a little bit of it involves infiltration. Gray Worm, I think his name is. He actually sneaks into the city with a bunch of other former slaves, and hands them weapons, and that's how the slaves take over the city. And the icing on the cake for that entire sequence was the fact that Daenerys showed no mercy to the Masters, despite the advisement of despite being advised against it by the knight, the Sir Barristan, I think his name is. I'm sorry if I'm getting any of these names wrong. I truly apologize. I haven't read the books. I just watched the show. But that was pretty dark. I mean, even for her character. I mean, usually she's clearly at a different spot that we saw her in season 1, and I would argue even season 3, because season 3 we never really saw her commit any of these cold-blooded killings. Um, so of course that's probably signifying a darker turn for her character and how she's growing more ruthless as a ruler. Now, how that will affect her overall conquest has yet to be seen, but it was an interesting change of pace, as relatively minor as it was. So they got around doing a big battle by using the infiltration tactic, which actually was a clever tactic, and in addition to being a clever solution, it did save them on a lot of the budget money that would have had to go into that. But I digress. Like I said, the best stuff in the episode came with Jaime, and here's something about those scenes that I liked, but at the same time I didn't like. His interactions with Brienne. Now, Brienne and Jaime are pretty close at this point, kind of like brothers in arms, except one happens to be a very big woman. So up to this point, I've kind of been seeing their relationship as such. That's how it's been portrayed up to this point, or at least as far as I could tell. But we get a few hints dropped in this episode, namely in terms of wordless looks, like they hold on their faces for a very long time, and it's supposedly meant to drop hints that there may be a romance or some type of romantic feeling going on between these two. And personally, I don't know if I'm alone in saying this, but I think that kind of weakens their relationship. It kind of makes it standard. Because what's been so interesting about the relationship thus far is that it hasn't really been any kind of... They haven't really had any kind of romantic interest in each other. I mean, it's been pretty unique. Like I said, they've had this almost brothers in arms relationship, where yeah, one's a man and one's a woman, but that has never really come into play. They've been watching each other's backs, and they have overcome numerous trials and tribulations. They've each been down and out, and they've made it to this pretty safe place. And now it's like they're sabotaging that by just making it another romance, or at least another potential romance. It's not poorly acted or anything, but I don't know. It's just one of those questionable moves that I hope they retcon. I know I'm not usually one for retconning, but I just think their relationship was better when it didn't revolve any kind of romantic feelings. Because, like I said, I think that diminishes the uniqueness of it. But again, there were good parts to their scenes together. Most namely, Jaime making a pretty noble decision in terms of what he's been capable of thus far. In that, yeah, he can't exactly send Sansa Stark back to her mom because her mom's dead. But he sends Brienne to find Sansa and protect her, and then it's unclear. It's either unclear or I forget. I don't know. But he sends Brienne after Sansa as a means of protection, because he can't exactly leave King's Landing. I mean, he's captain of the Knights, or not the Knights Watch, the King's Guard, the Lord Commander of the King's Guard. I think his title is. So he can't exactly leave, or at least not for the amount of time that would be necessary in finding Sansa. So he sends Brienne. He gives her a really cool set of new armor, and he does what I thought was a pretty logical move. It actually reeked more of logic than any kind of rite of passage. Although the rite of passage element certainly was there, but the reason I think it was a logical move was that, well, first of all, Jaime gives Brienne his nice and shiny new sword that his daddy gave him, because his father had originally intended for for Jaime to rule at Harrenhal. But being commander of the King's Guard in what is right now one of the safest places in the land, he's probably not going to get a chance to use that sword too often. So he logically gives one of the best made, and he logically gives one of the sturdiest and most revered swords in the land to someone who could potentially have real need of it where she's going. So there's that. There's the whole convenience aspect and the whole logic aspect of, yeah, she would need that, but also it does seem like a real rite of passage in that he has developed this very believable trust in her. So aside from the whole hints of romance element, the scenes between them were good, and basically Jaime did not have a bad scene. He has become such an interesting character on this show, in my opinion. I would argue he even rivals Tyrion in that department. And I know the Lannisters could easily be painted as just a family of bad guys. I mean, when you think of the villains of this show, most of the characters you come up with are Lannisters, or at least have some affiliation with the Lannisters. But Jaime and Tyrion, they actually have a lot of depth, and even the characters who are quote unquote evil have depth. Like Tywin has depth. Really, the only person who I am consistently bored and or irritated by is Lena Headey's character. And again, nothing to do with Lena Headey's performance. She's a fine actor, and she's doing what she can, but her character a lot of the time comes off as petulant to me. I mean, maybe it's the direction she's being given. Maybe it's that they're not really devoting enough time to showing a loving motherly side, because a lot of the time she just comes off as very snarky. We don't really see enough vulnerability beneath that, in my opinion. So, or it could be just me. I don't know. But there was another thing I wanted to talk about. Oh, we finally know who killed Joffrey. And it was who we suspected it to be last episode, which was Littlefinger. And Littlefinger, it turns out, was not working alone. He actually had the help of Diana Rigg's character. I don't know her name. I'm sorry. But Diana Rigg, there was finally a point to her character on the show. I know strategically it makes sense for her character to be there because her family is helping the Lannister family, but the reason she gives for killing Joffrey is actually a pretty legitimate reason. Really, the only hole I found it in was, okay, why didn't she tell Natalie Dormer, her granddaughter, sooner? It just seemed like a safer option to keep her in a loop. And I also thought the method of assassination was a bit of a stretch. It just seemed too probable to fail. Although, again, that was the point. It was meant to be seen as almost coincidental. But yeah, that was a good twist. I mean, for as predictable as it was that Littlefinger was the culprit, as he made his first reappearance last episode and smuggled Sansa out of the city, it was also pretty, or at least relatively unpredictable, that Diana Rigg was also involved. And the reason she gives is a legitimate reason. She's like, did you really think I would allow you to marry that beast? And now she can manipulate someone even younger. I mean, she got into the Lannisters' supposed good graces. She and her family had gained the Lannisters' trust when she was courting Joffrey, or moreover, was letting him court her. And now she can manipulate someone who is far more impressionable and has far less of a character. Although, again, I can't really blame that on the kid who plays Joffrey's younger brother, because this kid has barely gotten any scenes. But the show dabbles into pedophilia with a very uncomfortable scene where Natalie Dormer comes to visit this kid at night. But to their credit, it's meant to be uncomfortable. It's meant to be kind of disturbing, so I don't really know how much I can fault them on that. Yeah, it wasn't really pleasant to watch. Her basically flirting with this kid looks like 8 to 10 years old. I'm sure he's probably older, but yeah, it was uncomfortable. But again, it's meant to be uncomfortable. So yeah. And north of the wall, we actually got some good stuff north of the wall this time. Bran and his buddies got captured by one of the stock bad guys of the show. The show is a handful of stock bad guys. Some drunk mutineer guy. Some drunk mutineer night watchman. I mean, he and his buddies took over this village last season, and they've been holding it ever since. And the big concern, I actually got a detail wrong in one of my earlier video reviews. It's not the Night's Watch who are still loyal. They're not concerned that hostages will tell secrets to the wildlings. They are concerned that the wildlings will get information out of these mutineers, who are right in the wildlings' line of sight. So Jon Snow rightly wants to go there to capture or kill the mutineers before they can sing to the wildlings. So Jon Snow got some pretty good material nowadays. He still remains as likable as ever, in my opinion. It made sense that he would try to train the his allies, his brothers in arms, against the wildlings, considering he's been living with them for so long. We didn't really get any scenes with the wildlings this time around, but they were still a presence on the show based on the Night Watchman constantly making mention of them. It's kind of like Sauron in Lord of the Rings, like, oh, he's coming, and look at the effect he's having on all these other people. But yeah, we got some interesting setup with Jon Snow in that he and a small group of other people are going to silence these mutineers. So we're probably going to get a pretty cool night battle in the next episode. But he's one of the guys who is trying to get into his inner circle of friends is the guy who chopped off Jaime Lannister's hand. Again, I forget his name. But yeah, I have to, because we're meant to assume that this guy only wants to get in Jon Snow's good graces until Bran Stark gets there, because as far as he knows, Bran Stark is coming to Jon Snow. But I have to wonder how useful is Jon Snow going to be to this guy when he realizes that Bran has no intention of going to see Jon Snow. So I guess that adds a little bit of dramatic tension. Like, when are these two going to have their falling out? Yeah. So overall, I like this episode. It was pretty good. It has some really good character moments, namely with Jaime and his conflicts. This was a very Jaime-centric episode. In fact, I might put that for the thumbnail. I might put a picture of Jaime for this week's thumbnail, but now I'm just thinking out loud. So yeah, good episode. A lot of really good character moments. A lot of really good setup. Even throwing in a few decent twists. So yeah, I had a fun time with this episode.